The Semco success story, adaptability and continuous reinvention. Could survival be about constantly redefining yourself? Have you ever noticed that the most resilient businesses aren't the ones with the perfect plan, but the ones that pivot when necessary? Could it be that Semco's success isn't built on a fixed business model, but on continuous reinvention? I have seen that instead of following a rigid strategy, Semco evolves based on market needs and employee input. Is it possible that the greatest advantage in business isn't certainty, but adaptability? I've noticed that many companies cling to outdated methods simply because this is how we've always done it. Have you ever worked somewhere where change was resisted, even when it was clearly necessary? It slows progress, doesn't it? Now, imagine a workplace where employees are expected to question the status quo, where businesses constantly explore new industries, and where reinvention isn't a last resort, it's the default mode of thinking. Could it be that true longevity in business isn't about protecting what works today, but about creating what works next? And here's what makes Simco different. It doesn't just adapt when needed, it thrives on change. I have seen that instead of focusing on one industry or one product, Simco diversifies, constantly shifting based on opportunities and challenges. Have you ever noticed that the companies that last the longest aren't necessarily the ones that started with the best idea, but the ones that kept evolving their ideas? Could it be that success isn't about predicting the future, but about staying flexible enough to shape it? But this requires a new mindset. I have seen that many organizations fear change because it feels risky. Yet at Semco, change is seen as a natural part of growth. Employees aren't just allowed to question existing processes. They are encouraged to rethink everything. Have you ever considered how many groundbreaking innovations never happen because employees feel they can't challenge the way things are done? Could it be that the most innovative workplaces aren't the ones with the smartest people, but the ones where everyone is allowed to think differently? And then there's employee empowerment. Have you ever noticed that companies that resist reinvention often only listen to leadership while ignoring insights from the people who actually run the business? I have seen that at Semco, adaptability isn't dictated from the top. It's driven from within. Employees propose new ideas, new directions, and new industries to explore. Could it be that businesses grow stronger not by controlling change, but by letting the best ideas emerge naturally? And what about competition? Have you ever seen companies fail because they focus too much on defending their market position rather than evolving with the market? I have seen that Semco's willingness to pivot has allowed it to stay relevant across industries, proving that reinvention is the ultimate competitive advantage. Could it be that the strongest businesses aren't the ones that dominate an industry, but the ones that can succeed in any industry? So if Semco has built a thriving company by embracing adaptability and constant reinvention, what would happen if more organizations followed this approach? What if, instead of fearing change, businesses treated it as their greatest asset? Could it be that the best way to secure the future isn't by sticking to the plan, but by being ready to rewrite it again and again? The Semco success story, adaptability and continuous reinvention. Could survival be about constantly redefining yourself? Have you ever noticed that the most resilient businesses aren't the ones with the perfect plan, but the ones that pivot when necessary? Could it be that Semco's success isn't built on a fixed business model, but on continuous reinvention? I have seen that instead of following a rigid strategy, Semco evolves based on market needs and employee input. Is it possible that the greatest advantage in business isn't certainty, but adaptability? I've noticed that many companies cling to outdated methods simply because this is how we've always done it. Have you ever worked somewhere where change was resisted, even when it was clearly necessary? It slows progress, doesn't it? Now, imagine a workplace where employees are expected to question the status quo, where businesses constantly explore new industries, and where reinvention isn't a last resort, it's the default mode of thinking. Could it be that true longevity in business isn't about protecting what works today, but about creating what works next. And here's what makes Simco different. It doesn't just adapt when needed, it thrives on change. I have seen that instead of focusing on one industry or one product, Simco diversifies, constantly shifting based on opportunities and challenges. Have you ever noticed that the companies that last the longest aren't necessarily the ones that started with the best idea, but the ones that kept evolving their ideas? Could it be that success isn't about predicting the future, but about staying flexible enough to shape it? But this requires a new mindset. I have seen that many organizations fear change because it feels risky. Yet at Semco, change is seen as a natural part of growth. Employees aren't just allowed to question existing processes, they are encouraged to rethink everything. Have you ever considered how many groundbreaking innovations never happen because employees feel they can't challenge the way things are done? Could it be that the most innovative workplaces aren't the ones with the smartest people, but the ones where everyone is allowed to think differently? And then there's employee empowerment. Have you ever noticed that companies that resist reinvention often only listen to leadership while ignoring insights from the people who actually run the business? I have seen that at Semco, adaptability isn't dictated from the top. It's driven from within. Employees propose new ideas, new directions, and new industries to explore. Could it be that businesses grow stronger not by controlling change, but by letting the best ideas emerge naturally? And what about competition? Have you ever seen companies fail because they focus too much on defending their market position rather than evolving with the market? I have seen that Semco's willingness to pivot has allowed it to stay relevant across industries, proving that reinvention is the ultimate competitive advantage. Could it be that the strongest businesses aren't the ones that dominate an industry, but the ones that can succeed in any industry? So if Semco has built a thriving company by embracing adaptability and constant reinvention, what would happen if more organizations followed this approach? What if, instead of fearing change, businesses treated it as their greatest asset? Could it be that the best way to secure the future isn't by sticking to the plan, but by being ready to rewrite it again and again? The Semco success story, challenging traditional corporate norms. Could breaking the rules lead to a better workplace? Have you ever noticed that the most successful companies aren't the ones that follow corporate traditions, but the ones that challenge them? Could it be that Semco's success isn't about refining old systems, but about breaking them all together? I have seen that instead of following rigid structures, Semco prioritizes agility, adaptability, and common sense. Is it possible that the future of work isn't about policies and hierarchy, but about freedom and results? I've noticed that in many companies, bureaucracy slows everything down. Have you ever worked in a place where job titles mattered more than actual contributions? Where meetings stretched on without real outcomes? It's frustrating, isn't it? Now, imagine a workplace where ideas matter more than rank, and decisions are made quickly instead of drowning in approvals. Could it be that the fastest way to drive innovation is to get rid of unnecessary rules? And here's what makes Semco different. It doesn't just reduce corporate politics, it eliminates them. I have seen that hierarchy is flattened so that employees don't have to navigate layers of approval just to get things done. Have you ever noticed that when people are treated as equals, they collaborate more freely and share ideas without fear? Could it be that the best workplaces aren't built on titles and authority, but on trust and open communication? But this shift requires a different way of thinking. I have seen that many companies still measure success by hours worked rather than actual impact. Yet at Semco, performance is evaluated by results, not by seniority, not by how long someone sits at their desk, but by what they accomplish. Have you ever considered how much time is wasted in workplaces where people feel pressure to look busy instead of be effective? Could it be that the smartest way to increase productivity is to stop measuring the wrong things? And then there's adaptability. Have you ever noticed that companies that resist change struggle to compete in fast-moving industries? I have seen that Semco's model allows for constant evolution, where teams adjust their roles, responsibilities, and structures as needed. Could it be that success in today's world isn't about locking in rigid processes, but about staying flexible and responsive? And what about leadership? Have you ever worked in a company where decisions were made by executives who were too far removed from daily operations? I have seen that at Simco, leadership isn't about commanding from above. It's about enabling people to do their best work without interference. Could it be that the best leaders aren't the ones who hold power, but the ones who give it away? So, if Semco has built a thriving company by rejecting corporate traditions in favor of agility, transparency, and results, what would happen if more organizations embraced this mindset? What if, instead of clinging to outdated structures, businesses prioritized efficiency, innovation, and employee empowerment? Could it be that the real key to success isn't following the rules, but having the courage to rewrite them? The Semco success story. Democratic workplace culture. Could giving employees a vote make companies stronger? Have you ever noticed that the best workplaces aren't necessarily the ones with the most perks, but the ones where people feel heard? Could it be that Semco's success isn't just about removing hierarchy, but about creating a true democracy at work? I have seen that instead of a few executives making all the decisions, Semco allows everyone, from factory workers to office staff, to have a say in how the company is run. Is it possible that the key to long-term success isn't more leadership control, but more employee involvement? I've noticed that in traditional companies, major decisions happen behind closed doors. Have you ever worked somewhere where policies were introduced without explanation, leaving employees confused and frustrated? It creates disconnect, doesn't it? Now, imagine a workplace where every employee has a voice in decisions, from financial planning to hiring to company strategy. Could it be that when people are part of the decision-making process, they become more invested in the outcome? And here's what makes Semco different. Its transparency is radical. I have seen that at Semco, financial records, salaries, and even the company's long-term strategy are openly shared with employees. Have you ever wondered how much stronger a company could be if employees truly understood how the business operates? Could it be that when people have full information, they make better decisions, not just for themselves, but for the entire company? But this level of trust requires a shift in thinking. I have seen that many companies resist workplace democracy because they fear employees won't act in the company's best interest. And yet at Semco, employees don't just participate in decision-making, they take ownership of the company's success. Have you ever noticed that when people feel personally responsible for outcomes, they naturally make smarter, more sustainable choices? Could it be that collective responsibility leads to stronger accountability, not less? And then there's adaptability. Have you ever noticed that companies with rigid top-down leadership often struggle to pivot when industries change? I have seen that Semco's democratic approach allows teams to adjust quickly because decision-making is distributed, not bottlenecked at the top. Could it be that the best way to build a company that thrives in uncertainty is to make every employee part of the solution? And what about workplace culture? Have you ever worked in a company where employees felt powerless, where they followed rules they had no role in shaping? I have seen that at Semco, when employees vote on policies, they don't just accept company rules, they believe in them. Could it be that real engagement isn't about compliance, but about co-creation? So if Semco has built a thriving company by making workplace decisions democratic, what would happen if more companies followed suit? What if, instead of keeping strategy and finances hidden, leaders open the books and let employees help shape the future? Could it be that the strongest, most innovative companies aren't built through top-down control, but through bottom-up trust and participation? The Semco success story. Flexibility over rigid rules. Could letting go of control lead to greater productivity? Have you ever noticed that the happiest, most engaged employees aren't the ones with the strictest schedules? They're the ones with the most freedom. Could it be that Semco's success isn't just about removing bureaucracy, but about trusting people to manage their own time? I have seen that instead of enforcing rigid HR policies, Semco empowers employees to design their own work lives. Is it possible that true productivity isn't about hours clocked in, but about giving people the flexibility to work when and how they perform best? I've noticed that in many companies, strict policies dictate everything, from what people wear to when they arrive and leave. Have you ever worked somewhere where you had to ask permission just to take an afternoon off, even when your work was already done? It feels unnecessary, doesn't it? Now, imagine a workplace where there are no dress codes, no attendance tracking, and no rigid job descriptions. Could it be that when people are trusted to manage themselves, they become more responsible, not less? And here's what makes Simco different. It doesn't just allow flexibility, it prioritizes it. I have seen that employees set their own schedules, choosing when and where they work based on what fits their lives best. Have you ever noticed that when people have control over their time, they bring more energy, focus, and creativity to their work? Could it be that real work-life balance isn't about company benefits, but about personal freedom? But this approach requires a fundamental shift in thinking. I have seen that many companies believe that without structure, employees will slack off. And yet at Semco, removing rigid policies has resulted in higher engagement, better performance, and stronger retention. Have you ever wondered what would happen if companies measured success not by how much time employees spend at work, but by what they actually produce? Could it be that true professionals don't need rules to stay accountable? They just need trust. And then there's well-being. Have you ever noticed that in companies where work comes before everything else, burnout is common and motivation fades? I have seen that Semco's approach encourages employees to prioritize their health, their families, and their personal lives, not just their jobs. Could it be that a company that values people as humans first creates an environment where they actually want to do their best work? And what about job roles? Have you ever worked somewhere where your job description was so rigid that you couldn't contribute in new ways? I have seen that at Simco, employees aren't boxed into predefined roles. They have the freedom to evolve, learn new skills, and take on responsibilities that match their strengths. Could it be that the best way to unlock true talent and innovation isn't through structured job titles, but through flexibility and autonomy? So, if Semco has built a thriving business by replacing rigid policies with trust and flexibility, what would happen if more companies followed this model? What if, instead of forcing people to fit into corporate structures, organizations designed work around people? Could it be that the future of work isn't about enforcing rules, but about removing the ones that no longer serve us? The Semco success story, profit sharing, and financial transparency. Could sharing wealth create a stronger company? Have you ever noticed that employees who understand the business tend to care more about its success? Could it be that Semco's profitability isn't just about great leadership, but about financial transparency and shared rewards? I have seen that instead of keeping financials locked away in boardrooms, Semco opens its books to everyone, giving employees a real stake in the company's success. Is it possible that true motivation doesn't come from top-down incentives, but from feeling like an owner? I've noticed that in many companies, financial information is tightly controlled. Employees are expected to do their jobs without knowing how the company is actually performing. Have you ever worked in a place where decisions were made without any explanation, leaving you wondering why certain choices were happening? It creates disconnect, doesn't it? Now imagine a workplace where everyone understands the financials, from revenue to costs to profits. Could it be that when employees see the full picture, they make better, more informed decisions? And here's what makes Semco different. It doesn't just share financials, it shares profits. I have seen that employees at Semco don't just receive a salary. They receive a share of the company's success, directly tied to performance. Have you ever noticed that when people have a real financial stake in something, they naturally become more invested? Could it be that true engagement doesn't come from annual bonuses, but from knowing that every effort directly impacts earnings? But this level of transparency requires trust. I have seen that many companies fear that if employees have too much financial insight, they will demand higher wages or panic when things aren't going well. And yet, at Semco, open book management has created stronger alignment between employees and leadership. Have you ever wondered what would happen if companies trusted their employees enough to be completely honest about finances? Could it be that when people understand how money flows, they make smarter business decisions? And then there's motivation. Have you ever noticed that employees who don't see the bigger financial picture often feel disconnected from the company's goals? I have seen that at Semco. When employees understand how profits are made and how they personally benefit, they work more strategically, not just harder. Could it be that the best way to increase productivity isn't by demanding more effort, but by giving employees a reason to care? And what about accountability? Have you ever worked in a company where financial struggles were kept secret, leading to sudden layoffs or budget cuts without warning? I have seen that at Simco. Financial transparency eliminates uncertainty. Employees see the reality of the business and can adjust accordingly. Could it be that honesty about finances builds not just trust, but resilience? So, if Semco has built a thriving company by sharing both financial information and profits, what would happen if more organizations followed this model? What if, instead of treating financials as confidential, companies educated employees on the numbers that drive success? Could it be that the most sustainable, engaged, and high-performing teams aren't built through incentives alone, but through true financial ownership and understanding? The Semco success story, radical decentralization and employee autonomy. Could giving up control create more success? Have you ever noticed that the most engaged employees aren't the ones who follow strict rules, but the ones who feel a deep sense of ownership in their work? Could it be that Semco's success isn't about managing people better, but about managing them less? I have seen that instead of enforcing hierarchy and bureaucracy, Semco thrives by eliminating them. Is it possible that the most effective organizations aren't the ones with the most control, but the ones with the most trust? I've noticed that in traditional companies, employees are often told what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. Have you ever worked in a place where rigid policies left little room for creativity or personal choice? It can feel stifling, can't it? Now, imagine a company where employees set their own salaries, choose their own managers, and decide their own schedules. Could it be that the secret to a thriving workplace isn't micromanagement, but self-management? And here's what makes Semco different. It doesn't just allow autonomy, it demands it. I have seen that employees aren't passive workers. They are decision makers who act like business owners. There are no layers of approvals, no unnecessary reports, no corporate politics, just complete trust in people to do what's best for the company and themselves. Have you ever noticed that when people are truly trusted, they rise to the occasion? Could it be that the best way to drive performance isn't by imposing accountability, but by giving people control over their own success? But this approach requires a mindset shift. I have seen that many companies hesitate to give employees too much freedom, fearing that without structure, chaos will take over. And yet, at Semco, decentralized decision-making has increased productivity, not reduced it. Have you ever wondered what would happen if employees were treated as competent adults rather than subordinates? Could it be that when people are given real authority, they naturally take real responsibility? And then there's employee satisfaction. Have you ever noticed that workplaces with rigid policies often struggle with disengagement and turnover? I have seen that at Semco, employees stay because they have the power to shape their own work experience. They aren't just showing up for a paycheck, they're shaping their own futures. Could it be that true job satisfaction doesn't come from benefits and perks, but from the ability to control one's own career? And what about leadership? Have you ever worked with managers who made all the decisions from the top down, leaving little room for employee input? I have seen that at Semco, leadership isn't about giving orders, it's about removing barriers. There is no CEO making unilateral decisions. employees act as co-owners, and leadership exists to support, not control. Could it be that the best leaders aren't the ones who command, but the ones who trust their people to lead themselves? So, if Semco has built a thriving company by decentralizing power, what would happen if more organizations followed this model? What if, instead of focusing on enforcing policies, workplaces focused on empowering people? Could it be that the most innovative, engaged, and high-performing teams aren't the ones with the strictest rules, but the ones with the greatest autonomy? The Semco success story, self-management, and decentralized leadership. Could leadership work without bosses? Have you ever noticed that the most effective teams don't rely on one person at the top, but on everyone taking ownership? Could it be that Semco's success isn't about managing people better, but about letting them manage themselves? I have seen that instead of enforcing hierarchy, Semco has built a culture where leadership is fluid and decision-making is shared. Is it possible that the strongest organizations aren't the ones with the most control, but the ones with the least? I've noticed that in many companies, managers act as gatekeepers, deciding who does what, when, and how. Have you ever worked somewhere where you had to get approval for every small decision, slowing everything down? It can be frustrating, can't it? Now, imagine a workplace where managers don't micromanage, they facilitate, helping employees take full ownership of their work. Could it be that the best leaders aren't the ones who give orders, but the ones who step back and let others lead? And here's what makes Simco different. It doesn't just allow employees to self-manage, it expects them to. I have seen that instead of waiting for instructions, teams at Semco set their own goals, evaluate their own performance, and define success on their own terms. Have you ever noticed that when people are trusted to make important decisions, they naturally become more accountable? Could it be that true leadership isn't about power over others, but about empowering others? But this requires a shift in mindset. I have seen that many organizations assume that without strict leadership, chaos will take over. And yet, at Semco, removing hierarchy has led to greater efficiency, higher engagement, and better decision-making. Have you ever wondered what would happen if employees didn't need layers of approval to take action? Could it be that when people are fully responsible for their own work, they actually perform better? And then there's adaptability. Have you ever worked in a company where leadership was rigid, where people in positions of power held onto authority, even when others had better expertise? I have seen that at Semco, leadership is fluid. Employees step into leadership roles as needed, based on knowledge and skills, not titles or tenure. Could it be that the best leaders aren't chosen by organizational charts, but by who is best equipped to lead at the moment? And what about trust? Have you ever noticed that companies that don't trust their employees tend to drown in bureaucracy? More meetings, more approvals, more policies? I have seen that at Semco, when leadership is decentralized, trust replaces control. Employees don't need constant oversight because they own their work. Could it be that the strongest teams aren't built through management, but through shared responsibility? So if Semco has built a thriving company by eliminating rigid leadership structures, what would happen if more organizations followed this model? What if, instead of focusing on who holds authority, workplaces focused on who has the right expertise to lead in the moment? Could it be that the future of leadership isn't about managing people, but about creating an environment where everyone leads? The Semco success story, success through trust and responsibility. Could trust be the greatest productivity tool? Have you ever noticed that the most engaged employees aren't the ones who are monitored the most, but the ones who are trusted the most? Could it be that Semco's success isn't built on control, but on confidence in its people? I have seen that instead of enforcing strict oversight, Semco treats employees as responsible adults, and in return, they act like it. Is it possible that the key to both business success and employee satisfaction is as simple as trusting people to do the right thing? I've noticed that in many companies, employees are subjected to layers of policies, approvals, and managerial oversight, often more focused on preventing mistakes than encouraging initiative. Have you ever worked in a place where you had to justify even the smallest decisions? It slows everything down, doesn't it? Now, imagine a workplace where employees don't need permission for every action, where they are empowered to think and act independently. Could it be that the best way to build a high-performing workforce isn't through more rules, but through more trust? And here's what makes Semco different. It doesn't just assume employees will be responsible. It proves that they will be. I have seen that by eliminating excessive oversight and unnecessary bureaucracy, Semco has increased efficiency and reduced wasted time. Have you ever noticed that when people are trusted, they naturally take more ownership of their work? Could it be that accountability isn't something that needs to be enforced, but something that naturally happens when people feel empowered? But this requires a shift in thinking. I have seen that many companies hesitate to give employees full autonomy, fearing that without control, chaos will follow. And yet, at Semco, high trust has led to higher motivation, better decision-making, and stronger business results. Have you ever considered that employees might actually perform better when they aren't constantly being watched? Could it be that the strongest organizations aren't built on oversight, but on mutual respect? And then there's the balance between business success and employee satisfaction. Have you ever worked in a company where profits came at the expense of burnout, disengagement, and stress? I have seen that at Semco, employees don't just feel trusted, they feel valued. And when employees genuinely enjoy their work environment, they naturally perform at their best. Could it be that companies don't have to choose between profitability and happy employees? Because when trust is high, both thrive together. And what about leadership? Have you ever noticed that the best leaders aren't the ones who micromanage, but the ones who get out of the way? I have seen that at Semco, leaders act as guides, not enforcers, allowing employees to take responsibility for their own success. Could it be that the most effective leadership style isn't about keeping people in line, but about giving them the freedom to lead themselves? So, if Semco has built a thriving business by replacing control with trust and oversight with responsibility, what would happen if more organizations adopted this approach? What if, instead of focusing on preventing failure, companies focused on encouraging initiative? Could it be that the real key to success isn't about watching employees more closely, but about trusting them more deeply? The Semco success story. Work-life balance as a priority. Could true success mean putting life before work? Have you ever noticed that the most engaged and productive employees aren't the ones who work the longest hours, but the ones who feel in control of their time? Could it be that Semco's success isn't just about how work is done, but about how life is lived? I have seen that instead of glorifying overwork, Semco prioritizes balance, ensuring that employees thrive both personally and professionally. Is it possible that the most sustainable way to build a successful company isn't through longer hours, but through happier people? I've noticed that in many companies, employees feel pressure to choose between career growth and personal well-being. Have you ever worked somewhere where taking a break was seen as a lack of dedication? It leads to burnout, doesn't it? Now, imagine a workplace where employees are trusted to manage their own time, where they can step away when needed, pursue passions, and return refreshed. Could it be that true productivity isn't about working harder, but about living better? And here's what makes Semco different. It doesn't just allow work-life balance, it prioritizes it. I have seen that employees at Semco take sabbaticals, explore personal interests, and spend time with their families without career penalties. Have you ever noticed that when people are given time to recharge, they come back more creative, more energized, and more motivated? Could it be that the smartest way to drive innovation isn't by pushing people to the limit, but by giving them space to breathe? But this shift requires trust. I have seen that many organizations hesitate to give employees full control over their schedules, fearing it will lead to lower productivity. And yet, at Semco, removing strict work hours has led to higher engagement and stronger results. Have you ever wondered what would happen if companies measured success not by how many hours employees work, but by what they actually achieve? Could it be that true professionalism isn't about being present in the office, but about being present in life? And then there's happiness. Have you ever noticed that workplaces that ignore work-life balance struggle with high turnover and disengagement? I have seen that at Semco, employees stay because they want to, not because they have to. They are given the flexibility to design their own work-life integration, leading to stronger commitment and long-term success. Could it be that job satisfaction isn't about perks and promotions, but about having the freedom to build a life that actually works? And what about leadership? Have you ever worked in a company where leaders preached work-life balance, but never actually modeled it? I have seen that at Semco. Leadership sets the tone by embracing balance themselves, showing employees that personal well-being isn't just a policy, it's a priority. Could it be that the best leaders aren't the ones who demand nonstop dedication, but the ones who encourage people to step away when needed? So, if Simco has built a thriving company by making life just as important as work, what would happen if more businesses followed this model? What if, instead of expecting employees to sacrifice their well-being for success, organizations created a culture where both were possible? Could it be that the real key to sustainable high performance isn't about working more, but about living fully?